What's up, y'all? It's Chad. I'm back again with another episode of Ask Chad Grassy Logic. Me and Juno were just jamming onto the intro right there. I want to thank you both so much for joining me today. I have two really good guests with me. Grass guests, I guess is what I want to call them. Will Brandenburg and Erica. Erica, I'm sorry, what's your last name?
Armstrong.
Armstrong. That's easy as enough. So Erica Armstrong, thank you so much for joining us, and both of you for being on today. And they're actually both from First Crop. And that's really what we'll be talking about today. But, without further ado, we'll get into the episode. But first, could you both please give me a great intro? Whoever first, Erica will go first. Ladies first.
Sure. Yeah. Super grateful to be here. Chad, thank you for having us on.
Of course.
Will has been a big fan for a long time and speaking so highly of you. So we're really excited and grateful. My name is Erica Armstrong. I am one of the two co-presidents with First Crop. I have been with First Crop and their holding company for, 6 years, and really proud of what we're bringing forth in the First Crop space. So excited to walk you through that. But my role with First Crop is really around product development, the branding, the supply chain piece, and bringing forth something really unique.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for joining. And Will, without further ado, buddy, go ahead.
Thank you. And yeah, I'll say the same thing as Erica. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Chad. It's been wonderful to see what you're doing in this space and just tracking that over the past 2 years. It's exciting for the opportunity. And I'm a director of sales for First Crop. So keep it simple. I'm boots on the ground. I'm in charge of creating culture and connection with all the amazing accounts that we work with here in New Mexico. And it's my favorite part of the job. There's so many people in the space and doing so many amazing things, reaching the consumers and really handing forward education and the things that they deserve. So I'm that behind the scenes guy, but love to get out in the field. And it's been an amazing journey these past 2 years with First Crop, and my cannabis experience goes back pretty far. So I am really lucky to be with this team and looking forward to future things.
Nice, and thank you for that intro. And Will does a really good job. Everyone, he drives down. He's from Santa Fe. It's like 4 hours from where we live, and he'll go down to Sunlight Park, which is even further, and conduct training and stuff for the bud tenders there, which is great. And to be honest, like I'm glad that you guys do that, because not many places will do that. They'll just sell you the product, and then that's it. They don't really, give you a training on anything about it, because it is a very unique product too. So you can't just be like, it's gummies, and be like, okay, well, I want gummies. Well, it's not just gummies. There's more to these than just gummies. So we'll jump into that. Let's talk about First Crop now. I got you guys' background and everything. What is First Crop, and what's the mission of this company?
Yeah. So First Crop is a New Mexico brand. We launched in the cannabis space a little over 2 years ago. Our founding team, specifically our primary founder, Jane Pinto out of Santa Fe, really wanted to merge the medical and recreational space in cannabis and bring forth a wellness product that was functional and could really meet anyone where they were in their wellness journey. So we launched with a collection of 4 gummies. These are vegan, organically made gummies. And our real point of difference is that they are a functional formula. And so what that means is every piece of our ingredient has a purpose. So it's not for a label claim. It has a medicinal value, and it has a reason for it being in our formula. We work with our incredible herbal expert, Lisa Gonora, to create additional herbal formulas around the cannabis space. So even if you were to take the cannabis out of our gummies, which we did when we were beta testing, you will have a medicinal value herbal gummy. So we wanted to create 4 different need states. So it was really easy for someone to understand how and where and why to use our gummies. So we have happy, calm, relief, and sleep. We work with 2 incredible rosin suppliers to bring forth the cannabis component of our gummies. But really our goal is to bring forth wellness products. All of our gummies have 5 milligrams of THC, which was pretty disruptive when we entered the market. Most gummies come forth with a really high THC, but that's not needed. It's not needed because we have all those strong herbal components that are help uplifting the cannabis as well. So there's really a nice synergistic impact that's going to happen with our gummies. And because they're at that medicinal level, their goal is to bring your body into balance and support your body's ability to do what it's meant to do. So I love using the sleep one as an example. There's no melatonin. It is really meant to help bring your body to the natural form of sleep and help your body's ability to rest and restore sleep naturally. So we have hops in there, we have chamomile, we have lavender, and then we look at our rosin full spectrum to make sure that the terpene profiles are going to uplift that formula as well.
Cool.
Our gummies have a really unique approach to flavoring too. We didn't want to add any food coloring. Natural flavoring is a pretty scary concept in the flavoring world. And so we work with all natural and organic ingredients to bring forth flavors that are really sophisticated and playful, and they work within the natural taste of the gummy. Yeah, anything you want to add, Will?
Yeah, definitely. Beautifully said, Erica. It's been, again, so much fun to connect with the people who are out doing the daily speaking to consumers and bring forth a tool that really is extremely flexible. It can really approach the first time user, someone who's had bad experience with edibles, which is unfortunately very common in the space. And then high dose users who maybe have never felt or experienced the compounds and terpenes that come from the botanical portions of our formulas. It really has a lot to offer. And that's my favorite part, is to introduce bud tenders to this really beautiful tool. And case in point, the terpene profile of, say, lavender and the sleep formula, which Erica was talking about, the humulene and linalool content in an organically grown lavender is very high in comparison to cannabis by dry weight. So there's a really nice cross thread that I teach about those two terpenes specifically in our sleep formula and how well they combine with an indica, much less all the amazing, beautiful compounds that come with each individual herb that's added.
Cool. Wow. I mean, like, it's not just a gummy. You know, when you walk into most dispensaries, you get a gummy. It's just a straight gummy. They use distillate or rosin, whatever they use, and there's really nothing else to it. You know, they might, spice it up with a real juice here and there, or a squirt of some lime or something. But you guys really dug into it and said, we're going to give you guys a medicinal herbal kind of experience. So you can remove. And I was going to ask if you guys, use nanoemulsification technology, but I guess it don't really even matter because of the other stuff that you have inside of the edible. I asked that because a lot of people want the fast acting stuff, but there's so much in there that, works alongside with everything else that you really don't need the fast acting. Everything else in there kind of works with it. But I mean, I guess I'll just lay the question on there. Do you guys use nanoemulsification technology?
So we looked at that early on and chose not to go that route. We wanted a really gentle onset. So you will start to feel the herbs first, and then you'll feel the cannabis component. And so we liked a really mindful on-ramp for people to experience these products because they are supposed to be a wellness tool. And then on the flip side, we have Happy that is supposed to be really buzzy and kind of makes you have that tight face when you're smiling. And so we have a really playful one that's a great alcohol alternative. But we were really careful in what we wanted that feeling to be. So on the back of all of our bags, we carefully lay out what that onset experience should feel like, because oftentimes with edibles, if someone feels like they're not getting the experience they thought they should get as quick as they thought they should get it, they'll take more. And that's why oftentimes people have such a bad experience with edibles that Will was explaining. So we say start low, start slow. Our gummies are 5 grams, so it's a pretty hefty size gummy that someone can even cut it in half, cut it in quarters. But no, we chose not to move forward with any kind of nanotech early on.
And, you know, to be honest, I don't see it needing that too. Like I said before, you know, there's so much more in there in this product that you don't have to
Mhm.
rely mainly on that for the medicinal component. So that's
Exactly.
great. You know, like I'm looking at the ingredients. You know, Will's given me samples before. You know, I've tried the non-medicated and the medicated, of course. And you know, I see that. You know, even with the flavor, and this is a vegan product too, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
So we use an incredible vegan pectin that's made out of dry oranges. Very early on when we were creating this product, Jane, our founder, was talking to me and she's made this comment around everything matters. And from the people we partner with to every single ingredient to every single choice, we really look underneath, like with a magnifying glass. Our bags are recyclable, they're not compostable. That's our end goal. But every single ingredient and decision was made with such scrutiny. And I think that's what's made us successful to this point, is that customers, I think, are really appreciating the quality and then that consistency that comes from that good quality.
Yeah, definitely. You know, and you know, the market is changing and everything, and hopefully, you know, we'll see more quality products keep coming onto the
Mhm.
market because we start to see it slowly, and everything. Of course, you know, with the prices of things being different right now, of course, that could change in the future. But hopefully, we remain on the same path of this, you know, quality thing. We'll talk more about
Mhm.
that, of course, later on in the episode. But you know, because we do have a conversation for that, y'all, here in a little bit. But you know, it's great that you guys are really focusing on the quality part because you know, some people are just we're just getting it out, we're just throwing this
Mhm.
in there. We don't care what it is. You know, it's a Walmart ingredient. We're not too sure where it even came from. But it's great that you know you're taking your time from the ground up, from
Thank
the very
you.
beginning of the ingredients to the people you work with. So you know it speaks volumes because you know it's a tough industry. And finding the right people to work with is hard.
Yeah, tough is a gentle way to say that. But early on, we looked at who were the customers that we wanted this product to benefit. And
Mhm.
obviously, we had in mind like the cannabis OGs that you brought up early on, but we also really looked at those people that maybe had a negative experience with cannabis edibles,
Mhm.
the soccer moms, those people that are wanting to step away from maybe like the Tylenol and the
Mhm.
aspirin or even the glass of wine in the evening. So we tried to really have a wide net. And that's what helped inform a lot of those decisions as well, is just questioning, would it work for this person or this person? And that was the same approach that we took with our herbs with Lisa Gonora, is making sure that you would get the most positive impact with the largest group of people.
Yeah, and you know, it's really easy to you know essentially overdose on edibles. You know, you won't die, but you know, you will kind of green out or just not have a great experience. And you know, I've seen that
Mhm.
many times. So it's really great that you know the low dosage thing is being pushed because I am seeing that. And to be honest, I'm seeing slowly, very very slowly, more people kind of get away from smoking itself or you know combustible stuff and inhalation. Even Will, you know, he doesn't smoke that much with me, which is okay. But you know, I understand that the health effects, and even myself, you know, I'm getting close to my 40s. I'm like, you know, how long can I actually smoke? You know, and
Mhm.
before I can have to start really thinking about my health, because smoke is smoke regardless of where it comes from.
Yep.
You know, and every doctor tells me that, and every you know medical professional, science person will tell you that. So it's great that you guys are really focusing on that now. You know, like we're gonna have the low dosage, you know, option for people. We're gonna have something that's you know, more clean for people that want to you know get away from you know the maybe they're done with their party life and they, you know they want to be a little more you know health conscious. You know, they're not just going to put every edible in their body that they see. So it's great that you guys are going that route. Now here's my other question. You know, what other products do you guys have on the you know coming down the pipe? Because you know we know drinks are kind of becoming more popularized. You know, is that something in that area you guys are going to do, or what other products you have working down
Yeah.
on?
So we're a really small team.
Yes.
Um, Bobby, Will, and myself are really the day-to-day team. We have obviously incredible founders, incredible board. We have lots of big dreams of new products. Constantly watching what's happening in the industry. Yeah, it's been fun to watch drinks. It's been fun to watch like the savory products. The more playful seasonal products have been fun. Right now, our goal is to just stay consistent with these 4 SKUs and really continue to give our retail partners the best support and partnership. We don't want to spread ourselves too thin and miss out on supporting the brands that we currently have. But believe me, we have lists and lists of where we would like to go to next. We're just trying to be really mindful and strategic with that growth.
Yeah, it's a great, great way to break it out, Erica. It's really about trust. In this industry, there's so many people, jumping in, companies jumping in. There's a lot of brands, a lot of products out there, and to build trust over time operationally with our accounts and supporting them in the best way we possibly can is definitely the focus. As you guys said, it's a tough industry, and without that kind of support and that arm lock with our accounts, it's really a loss on both sides of a huge opportunity. So focus now, get the brand trust, get the consumer loyalty, and then we definitely will be bringing amazing things to the table.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. You guys are focusing on what really matters at the beginning versus throwing spaghetti at the wall. And I like that approach. Like you have to really be thoughtful of this. And, so what something's popular, like right now, we're seeing a rise of the solventless stuff, but that's been there the whole time. So we're going through like this wave of, people finding rosin, they're finding, other solventless products, even temple balls and old school hash and stuff is kind of starting to make its way back into the markets with more people. And I think one thing that people are noticing too is the health conscious thing. They don't want to consume something that was extracted with butane or other chemicals and stuff. Water pressure, heat, and ice is really the only way that you really need to go for certain things, especially if you want a full spectrum product like you all are trying to provide. And you don't really get that with distillate. You get that with, solventless stuff. So it's great that, you're not just like, well, this is popular now, let's do it. Because the person that is popular now, they've been probably working on that product for years, if not their whole career. And now is their time to do that. And so when people jump in it, it kind of muddies the water. So you're just like, well, we're not going to add to that muddy water. Let's figure this out. Let's get the consistency together. And I love that, because that's one thing the industry is really lacking is consistency. And once you nail that down, once you get to the other products, and hopefully it'll be drinks one day. I know when I open up a can of it, it'll probably be the same every single time. So I really, appreciate you guys taking your time like you are. It's really easy to just jump into everything the moment you see it, but really holding your ground and saying we want to make sure that this product is the best thing that we can give people before we move on to other categories of the same industry and stuff. So hats off to y'all. That's not easy to fall into, because it's so easy to just say, yeah, let's do it, let's go 100,000 miles an hour, and then it doesn't work, and then you're just continually throwing spaghetti at the wall, and maybe one or two things sticks. But you're really focusing on that one thing. And to be honest, I'm starting to see your product in dispensaries in more places. I'll just go to some random dispensary or something, and I'll be like, hey, first crop, that's cool to see. So it's really great. It means Will's also doing a great job as well. So good job, Will. And of course, like I said, training the employees, that's huge, because how can they sell your product if they don't know anything about it? And that's like, something that I've think about too, coming from, my years of retail and managing it even. So Will, here's a question for you. How do you go about with your thought process when it comes to training employees? What's the theory you kind of go into when you're training people?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. As I said, I enjoy it so much. It's really my favorite part of the job. I've always been, for years and years now, I've been a coach, a trainer, taught meditation and qigong, and lots of history and hospitality as well. So the people connection is just my thing, and I love it. So when I step into a training, really, I start with culture. I start with what this industry is and what it's about. Typically, I ask bud tenders, what their why is. Why are they a bud tender? Have they chosen to be there because they've got a family member who's really received some higher quality of life from cannabis in some way, or are they just really, really enthusiastic about education and the plant in general on their own level? And we connect there first and foremost, because you could be in any setting that's in the cannabis industry and just kind of saying the same old stuff. Like we were just talking about, there's a lot of products that are doing the same thing. So to just break ground with a very different beginning is super important. I talk a lot about my history in cannabis, and it's just a really beautiful share moment. So we get that heartstring built, that culture built, and then we go into some of the cool stuff that we do. We typically spend a lot of time on the live rosin selection process that we have. Only organically grown from some of the best producers in the state. Currently, Loud Leaf Organics is one of our main partners. We've worked quite a bit with Goldfish Farms as well, who just won the Best in Grass Gold for their live rosin. And so just some beautiful sourcing, and we connect the dots. We say, these are the people we're working with. We're bringing this to the table for you, and creating a culture around it that is different in the industry, that they can really lean into and trust as far as a manufacturing and ingredient standpoint. Then when they look across the counter and they make eye contact and are talking to that consumer, they can have confidence that they're handing over a product that really does what it says it's going to do, that is safe and that is consistent. It does the same thing every time. And that's huge for them. They're there every day giving recommendations. And when there's something they can really trust and they've tried themselves and it works, it really is a different conversation.
Yeah, 100%, and thank you for that. I'm glad you go into that. And with that being said, what is both of y'all's why then? let me ask you that question. What's y'all's why?
So I have been in consumer products over 20 years now. And I left corporate consumer products because of the waste and the misconception around product labels and how how brands don't do a great job of being transparent what's in their labels. So when I became a mom, I left corporate and chose to only work with brands that I felt like were making a positive impact. And when Jane approached me about First Crop, and her motto, our tagline is "Being well is an act of love," and it just really resonated with me as a mom of two littles and wanting to create products that were going to add value to someone's life, whether it was the person that is having chronic pain, giving them a tool that's going to allow them to have balance in their life and get back to the life they love. As we know, sleep impacts everything from your immune system to how you show up with your loved ones. So I just was really inspired by the opportunity to work with a brand that was going to do some good in the world. And anytime I'm making a choice to work away and not be with my kids, I'm really intentional with my time. And so this just felt like what better place to give my time than a company like this. So that's kind of why I show up every day.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for that. And that's a great reason and purpose, because, sometimes we're in a certain industry or a certain job, and then one day you just have that click, you're just like, what the hell am I doing? Like, why am I here? Let's change it up, or, why am I still here if I don't believe in this, or if I feel this is doing good, like I feel like it's doing more harm. Like when I was a bartender, it got to the point where I feel like I'm doing more harm than good. I'm getting people drunk and I'm feeding them poison. I'm getting paid for it. Yeah, cool. I guess some free food every now and then. But like, is it really worth it in the end? I need to be doing more good. And it was good for, huh?
I just said that's beautiful.
Yeah. And like I did it because I was going to college. I needed money. And it was a good experience. So don't get me wrong, great experience. I loved it. But yeah, you just in the end, you just feel dirty. You're just like, I'm sitting here. If someone has an issue, I'm making it worse. With the alcohol, I actually watched friends while I was a bartender drink themselves to death, unfortunately. And something like that really kind of makes you sit there and think like, holy shit, like this dude was able to go buy a box of vodka and literally drink himself to death. Like that's, I don't want to be fueling that. And so it's great that you had a something that popped up in your mind too as well, and you're just like, holy crap. So it's great that you went this way, and lucky I was already messing with the cannabis industry. We weren't where we are now, but I just really just doubled down on it. Just like, I'm just gonna double down on my cannabis thing. We're gonna go that route. So Will, what's your why?
Yeah, no, thanks for giving us the opportunity to express a little more on the personal side, Chad.
Of course.
So for me, it was always part of my culture, my family kind of tribe, if you will. Growing up in northern New Mexico, we've got a pretty extensive history of like alternative lifestyle and kind of the hippie era and the migration that happened back in the day.
Yeah.
So that was definitely my community. So it was around. It was a sacrament, just like growing vegetables, just like being close to nature. It was just inherent in what I was taught as a child and growing up. And so I started growing when I was 16, had started smoking when I was 13, lightly on and off. And at 16, I started growing, so I had some product. And this is obviously legacy market days, because won't mention my exact age. Won't keep that disclosed, but
looks good for his age. That's all you got to know.
I'm good. Thank you, sir. So yeah, it was just got to the point where I had some extra cannabis around, and started selling that. And then I grew that that aspect quite a bit until 2009. I was actually I was caught up in a case out of Texas on the illegal side, and I ended up doing at the federal level 4.5 years of prison time in a federal prison camp, which is probably the easiest of the time, thank God. But through that time, I had a lot of opportunity to think, and think about what I was doing. And my involvement in cannabis had started really nice and organically, but it ended up being, through that time when I was, doing a lot of business, was very monetary based, very ego based, very flashy, and just really materialism based, which was not what I was taught as a child. So I realized that the alignment was off, and I had made choices that I would never make again. So I realized that if I was going to be in cannabis in any way after doing my time, that it would be intentionally driven, that it would be aligned with my belief structures and higher purpose, and my ability to give to the world in the ways that I'm talented in. So after my prison time, I was able to connect with First Crop. This is about 8 years ago now, and just an amazing team. And I saw what they were doing, so beautifully, intentionally put together, and with amazing plans and visions. So it aligned, and I'm grateful, forever for all of the team, and Jane Pinto, visionary founder, and just the opportunity to be with First Crop and step back into cannabis was something that really felt aligned. Yeah. And you see it every day. The bud tenders out there see it every day. People are seeking help, education, quality of life. And if I can have any effect on that on any scale, that's where I want to commit my work in cannabis to. And I'm just super happy to have the opportunity, and to be in New Mexico, my home state, doing it it's a joy.
Yeah, dope. And and thank you both for sharing your stories and everything. I really like to kind of get people to know, who are these people in these businesses. They're just people like just you and I, and you can connect with so many people, Will, because there's been so many people who have been unjustly arrested for cannabis, use, or selling, whatever. And now we have that opportunity to do it legally. So thank you for sharing that. And if anything, it seems like it almost redirected you to the path that you should have been on, versus the path that you were going. So, if anything, it was one of those things where it's like a beautiful tragedy in the end. But, you came out strong, and you're with a really great company. So, thank you for sharing that. I know it's, not easy to share something about your past that, you did and that happened. But, thank you. And I'm sure a lot of people watching and listening are probably like, damn, that was me too, and maybe it'll give some people a motivation to, maybe change their life, or either continue on the path that they're now on, from one that they were on. So, thank you for that. And thank you both for sharing that. I'd really like to just kind of dig in a little bit more. So what are some future plans for First Crop? I know we talked about no drinks yet, no other products, but, was there other plans for maybe, expansion in other states at some point, or are we just really focusing strictly on New Mexico? Or, maybe you're, looking to partner with some other people, what are some future plans for y'all?
Yeah, so we're really excited to grow more in New Mexico. There are some really great brands developing in New Mexico, coming into New Mexico. And so we just want to continue to show up and make sure that we're one of those brands as well. So we have some really competitive goals with our sales team, and grateful for Will. But there are definitely some larger retailers that we have been courting for a couple years now. And on the flip side, we have some retailers that we've been with from the very beginning, and we're excited to dig a little deeper with them and do some fun in-store marketing, some special swag for the bud tenders. So really, we are all in with New Mexico, and we have so many cool things that we can do in the state that we're in and that we've been in for 2 years. We're looking at new fun, like in-store marketing displays, some ways to love on our bud tenders who just are incredible, and then really want to launch and continue to grow.
Yeah.
And then maybe some new products, but that's really where our focus is over the next couple months. What about you,
Awesome.
Will?
Yeah, I would second that for sure. My focus is 100% New Mexico. There's layers to this industry, and I track national scope stuff as well. But really, New Mexico is this beautiful melting pot right now. It's literally the toughest state in the nation to become a successful brand in. We've got everybody here that wants to be here, and there's a lot of competition. So I think it's just a beautiful place to prove and to put in that hard work and due diligence, and all built on what we do being different with our formulations and those connections with the community, with the bud tenders, with everybody we come across with our offerings. To Erica's point, it's great to get back to the bud tenders. We are very strong with a piece of software called Sparkplug, which pays a direct incentive for every unit sold to our bud tenders and our partners who have decided to join that platform with us. So things like that just really feel amazing to be able to get to and continue to do. We're actually having, an effect on the bud tenders who are really doing the heavy lifting day to day. So focus in New Mexico and just really beautiful, fruitful, long-term relationships.
Awesome. And speaking of, you all also actually just won an award at Best in Grass, correct?
Correct. Our happy gummies just won first place in the edible gummy category, and we were sincerely blown away.
Well, congratulations.
There was some incredible competition.
Yeah.
We were the only 5 milligram gummy. Everyone else was 10 milligrams. Some great older brands, some great new brands, tons of cool innovation. We were sincerely blown away. And so really excited to leverage that over the next year of holding this title. And hopefully we get to come back next year and present a new SKU. The Best in Grass competition was really, really well done. So I'm sure you know this, but a nationwide event. This was its first year in New Mexico, and it offers the ability for any brand that enters to receive feedback. So that was one of the real reasons that we entered. As such a small brand, you don't really think that you stand a chance in some of these big competitions. So we were excited about the feedback piece. Anyone that judges, there's a mix of consumers can judge at Best in Grass, as well as cannabis stakeholders and those who have been experts in the industry. So you get a nice variety. They go through an online portal and they enter their feedback on every SKU based on flavor, texture, color, consistency, mouthfeel. It's really an in-depth questionnaire, and brands receive all that feedback. So we just thought we're definitely going to enter because that's gold mined to get some great third-party feedback. And then when we went to the award ceremony and they announced us as first place, we're so over the top excited and just super, super grateful.
Nice. Well, congratulations. The hard work pays off, of course. And you guys have a great product. So, it's just speaking for itself, and more people are finding out about it, slowly as time goes, word of mouth and marketing and training and all that good stuff. So, y'all deserve it. So, pat on the back and everything. Hopefully you continue to win more awards. There's a lot of awards shows here in New Mexico. So hopefully, the Best in Grass will be one that continues to come here in New Mexico, and you see if you guys can continue that title. So congratulations. And, it is impressive that, the 5 milligram won. And we were talking about this earlier, like how we're kind of moving away from that. Well, that's actually our next conversation. But, the fact that the low THC thing, or excuse me, I was going to say disposable pen. What the hell? I don't know why. Edible one shows a lot in that the market is kind of slowly changing. So thank you for that. And, congratulations. But how was the ceremony? Tell me about that. How was the vibe, the feel, and everything too?
Yeah. Well, why don't you take that one? Yeah.
Yeah, it was so much fun. We know a lot of people in the space, so it's great always to see, the faces and see new team members, whoever it might be. But specifically, Mark does an amazing job. He is just exuberant and he's funny and just really sets the scene for the whole event. And I'm really happy that him and his partner have been successful, and they'll most likely continue here in New Mexico. And they've got so many projects going on in other states. So it was really to your question, vibey. It was happening. There was some great DJs going on. There was some great live artists. It was just a lot of fun. I think definitely a kind of next tier event and next tier competition, and that's what we were hoping to see. So it was really fun to be part of.
Dope, and that's great to hear. I was kind of curious. I didn't get to go. We're working on a big order over here, so I was like, crap, I gotta stay. So maybe next year I'll be able to go. I was planning on going, but who knows? And it's the first one, so maybe next year, it'll keep getting better every year, and maybe I'll be able to see y'all win in person this time. So again, congratulations. It sounds like it was a great time, and I missed out. I had Kaz on the show actually a few weeks back. So Kaz, my bad, I missed it. I know I said I'd be there, but things pop up. How business is. But I'm glad that it was a success, and congratulations again. Hopefully you guys, keep winning some more awards and everything, because there's a bunch of chances in New Mexico all over the place. So congratulations, and yeah. But before we move on to our next topic, do you guys have anything else you want to bring up or talk about? Not everybody jump in once.
I know. I just feel like we've been rattling off so much to you. So let's.
I think the question you were going to ask about our win in particular, Best in Grass being the 5 milligram gummy dose and kind of that lower THC model. I mean, we definitely want to touch on that in this discussion. So I think it's a great interlude into that conversation, because it touches back on Best in Grass.
Yeah.
And the difference there and what's going on in the industry with, education and offers from companies.
Okay, well, we'll jump on to the next topic then. But before we do, where can people find y'all online, real life, and which shops?
Awesome. So you can find us at firstcrop.com. We keep it super simple with all of our emails and websites and communications. You can find me personally at will@firstcrop.com. Feel free to send an email. Give a call. My number is 505-699-2979. And happy to answer questions, comments. I'm always, when I am training, telling the bud tenders to call me up, give me questions. If there's a consumer's got a question, just ring me up. So I'm super available. And then our Instagram handle is at firstcrop_. And we've got some beautiful content. Our website's really beautiful. We take a lot of time on what we produce as far as collateral and our imagery goes. So it's very, gen pop, I would say, very general demographic. It's for everybody. And those of us who haven't seen our stuff, check us out. It's definitely very educational, very clean, and very beautiful stuff that we produce.
Awesome. And thank you for that. I wanted to make sure I asked that and, direct people in the right place where to find y'all.
Mm-hmm.
So that's great. And, you guys are active on social media. That's good. There's some people that don't, but these days you have to, we're so restrictive here in the industry that it's like almost impossible to not be on some kind of social media website or something. So thank you for that. And with that being said, let's move on to the next conversation, which I'm excited to talk about. I know Will's excited to talk about. Let's talk about this THC thing. And now as our industry matures, we go on with this. I mean, we're about 2 years away from being considered a mature market. And we're starting to show signs of that. We're starting to see some changes. And one of those changes is coming through the consumer. And it seems that the consumer is starting to wake up. But one of the things that I've noticed, and I asked my bud tender friend about this for the last two topics, I was like, you know what, give me a couple of, some things that you've been seeing that's kind of been irking you. And one of them is that the younger class of cannabis users are starting to pick it up that THC only isn't the only thing you want to be going for. Buying straight off of THC, that's just not the way to go. But it seems that the older crowd is kind of stuck. They're just kind of, stuck in their ways kind of situation. And I get it. Some of them won't, but they make up a huge demographic of the cannabis users, and especially the medical cannabis patients in the nation and in the state of New Mexico. Older people make up a huge percentage of users. So educating them is huge. And to be honest, we're going a different direction. for when it comes to THC. You know, it seems that we're pulling back on this 40 million % THC flower that people are trying to push, or, you know, whatever it may be. And we're kind of dialing it back, and we're dialing up other things. You know, we're trying to figure out what other compounds work better: CBN, CBG, THCV, you know, THCA, of course, you know, one of the most, you know, ones that's overlooked. And of course, you know, those from Texas, you know, they know what I'm talking about. But THCA has a lot of benefits, you know, that are within it, you know, and it's non-psychoactive. You know, CBG, you know, that's another one. Of course, the terpenes, you know, the, you know, Tropicana sulfurs, you know, the scotoles, all these other ones that are inside of the cannabis plant that we're, you know, either just discovering or we're just figuring out. And to be honest, I think 2 weeks ago, they discovered a new cannabis compound altogether. So we're learning new ones. So why would we just focus on one, you know, compound that's inside of the plant when there's just so many others with so much potential, you know? And I'm glad that we've, for the most part, said, hey, we were wrong ourselves. It's not just about THC. So let's figure out how to educate this and everything. And so how do you guys go about it? You know, because you're essentially on one of the forefront people that's pushing this right now. How do you go about, you know, educating people in regardless of the age on lower THC products?
So we do actually start with the age, because depending on the age is going to tell us how that consumer feels safe receiving that information.
Mhm.
So the younger demographic is really more comfortable with hearing from trusted resources, whether it's a trusted influencer or it's a dear friend in their community, where the older demographic still really likes to receive information from more of a doctor or what they would consider a medical expert in whatever way that looks.
Yeah.
So we first need to understand how they want to receive information. And then we go back to that idea of casting a wide net. So we, about 2 years ago when we first launched, we put together a endocannabinoid system 101. And that was really targeted to our older consumers, because we needed to break down at a medical level of how and why these compounds work inside your body.
Mhm.
And the benefit they have. And we needed to break, I mean, I got a question just a couple of days ago or this weekend on the difference between hemp derived and cannabis, marijuana derived products, and like why some people can buy stuff online. So that's a whole other piece of confusion that I've been seeing. Then we look at our younger demographic who is really into the herbal wellness, and they're very comfortable navigating online. So we've got tools that specifically are available to them, whether it's Instagram or partnering with resources that they're comfortable with on Instagram. So we try to just have our education that's out there in a couple different formats so people can digest it in a way that's comfortable for them. The messaging that we constantly say is that our products are not about getting high. It's about getting well. And so if you are a consumer that is looking to have a just high experience, awesome. But we're probably not the right brand for you. There's a lot of other beautiful brands that you can turn to. If you are looking for a wellness tool, we have these 4 options. And again, it goes back to our full spectrum cannabis is going to give you a different experience. Same with our herbal components that are going to have a synergistic therapeutic. They're going to really like heighten that therapeutic experience. You don't really need as much cannabis because of all the other components that we put into our gummies. And so it's just the constant re-education of that. I would say educating is one of Will's superpowers. As you can see, he loves to connect. And so he will sit with, whether it's a one consumer that walks in when he's doing one of his pop-ups, or it's like, 15 bud tenders at a time. And he has this ability to be able to really connect with that person and describe how each formula would work for them. So I know that's like a really long answer, basically saying that we give you a lot of different touch points because we know every customer likes to receive education different, but we truly don't believe in high dosing equals better.
Yeah. And thank you for the information first, because some people don't know where to start in the first place when it comes to educating a customer or anyone really. They just, customer asks for this, give customer that. When you could be educating the customer and making more money and also satisfying the customer a little bit more. So
Mhm.
it's like a, win-win for everybody kind of situation once you do it that way.
Yeah.
So thank you for touching on those bases of, some tips on, how to go about it, because telling people, well, the younger crowd, they listen to more of the internet, friends, and influencers. But the
Mhm.
older crowd, they tend to listen to their doctor. So,
Mhm.
maybe we need to get with the doctors and kind of, start working with them more, which, I've heard, chatter about that online too, as well as, we need to start getting with these doctors. So that way we can get on the same page with them, and they can just not just be like, well, THC, CBD, and then that's it. Because the doctors need to be educated on cannabis too.
Mhm.
And that's something that's lacking in all Western medicine kind of schooling going on these days,
Mhm.
is they're not really including cannabis in anything when it's a huge part of an American person's daily life. I think majority of Americans live close to a dispensary here in America. So why wouldn't we start pushing that? So I think in the future, and in years going down the road, we'll have to work with more of the medical professionals, so that
Mhm.
way the older crowd can start getting the same great information and everything.
Yep.
So Will, to you, what are some tactics that you use to try to help, teach people about, it's not all about THC?
Yeah. It really, for me, in those conversations, which are literally every day, whether it's consumer or bud tenders, it comes back to that why.
Mhm.
The question, instead of why are you in cannabis, is why are you approaching cannabis?
Yeah.
Have you been recommended by possibly a physician who's open-minded to it but doesn't know enough? Have you been recommended by your family circle, or is it just something that you're curious about?
Mhm.
I start there because everyone is so individually beautiful and different that, again, it's important to hold their hand and to introduce them to the education in a really safe and comfortable way, like Erica said. As an industry, I think if we're providing that type of connection when a new consumer walks through the door, they're going to come back and they're going to build trust with you, and they're going to work through finding their sweet spot with cannabis and be in a really nice place for the long-term trajectory. And then, of course, they're going to talk to people about their experience. And really, if we want to see this industry grow and we want to support it in that growth, that's the most important thing. So the focus is there for me, and the conversation can go a million different ways. But it's interesting and fun with our product. We can usually meet and match that person in that direction with
Mhm.
one of our formulations, with one of the facets of our formulations.
Yeah.
Are they a concentrate person? Then, okay, we'll talk about our live rosin and just the beautiful work we do on sourcing live rosin. Are they a very first timer or someone who's maybe had a bad experience with edibles?
Mhm.
We'll talk about a microdose. If you cut our gummy in half, you have a true scientifically proven 2.5 milligram microdose. So it's applicable to those people who are just wanting to experience THC a little bit, just touches that threshold.
Mhm.
And then if it's somebody who, is a 50 milligram kind of distillate consumer, is just used to doing a lot of THC, we talk about the entourage effect and the beautiful full
Mhm.
spectrum body feel and cerebral feel that you get from our gummies across the board with all four formulas. And it really sparks interest. And we
Mhm.
hear those consumers come back and say, you know what, you were right. I thought I was going to have to eat 10 gummies to get
Mhm.
my 50 milligrams, and I put the
Mhm.
bag down at 3 because that quick onset with the herbs and the
Mhm.
botanicals and adaptogens was so different for my body, was so enjoyable that I was good. I was set, and I had this wonderful experience. So yeah, that's the long answer. The short answer is we can really meet our consumers when they walk through the door, and we're happy to meet anybody's consumers. It's not, in that sense, all about First Crop. It's about building this industry and building it on a foundation of trust and education and the things that we really need in order to for this to be accepted and to spread further, and for more people's quality of life to increase.
Yeah, 100%. And those are great tools and great points, to be honest. Because everyone's different in a way they're going to learn too, and so you have to kind of take a more personable kind of stance with some of people, and stance, but like an approach with certain people. And one thing I've noticed too is when I talk to the older crowd, it's always well, this ain't like the stuff back in the day. The stuff was better because this and that and blah blah blah. And like we look back at the stuff from back in the day, it was very low THC, like from
Mhm.
2% to 8%, at most. But what we don't know, and this is something that I realized while I was typing this out today, was we don't know what else was in the plant at the time.
Yeah.
We don't know the levels of CBD. We don't know what terpene levels at all, because we had no clue. We didn't know what CBD was back then, CBG or any of this. I don't even think we knew what the terpenes really were. And they definitely weren't testing for it, because back then they were just enforcing a law, based off on the, THC being present in the first place. So that's one key component that we're really, really missing from, this old school cannabis that, these older people really want, is we don't know what else was in it. We just know it was low THC and it was scraggly looking as shit. That's really all the information we have.
Well, that reminds me though, we have been asked a few times if we would ever consider adding in additional minor cannabinoids. And we believe in not manipulating the plant. We believe in the entourage effect. We believe that we get in trouble as a culture and as a people when we start messing with Mother Nature, and we really believe to trust her and that she's doing it right. So as of now, we don't have any plans to isolate certain cannabinoids and add them in later. We go through a full terpene review with every single herb and every single selection of live rosin. But that's kind of where we feel comfortable taking it, that aligns with us as a brand.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. And a lot of times the strain that we'll select, which, by the way, we haven't touched on yet, we actually put that on the back of our packages. So with our gummies, we actually can speak to and understand exactly what strain is in our gummies on each production run. But a lot of those strains that we'll select have those naturally occurring levels of some of those added cannabinoids that you see in other formulas. So CBN in sleep formula, or CBG in our pain, the relief formula. So yeah, Mother Nature, I like to say, and I know that we speak about it at team meetings a lot, is that she already did it best as probably anyone is going to be able to do. It's hard to top, hundreds of thousands of years of evolution and balance, and just kind of what we've evolved as humans with and in our environments. And yeah, to Erica's point, it's a very safe way to go about formulation, I believe.
Yeah, and to listeners, I wasn't trying to be a whole first crop episode, but just their product is so unique that all of these topics have been able to be pointed towards what you guys are doing. So I'm just kind of curious, because a lot of that you've been doing is kind of what I've been kind of trying to push too, but your product is already kind of speaking for it. It's like, well, if you want lower THC, if you want this and that, there's our product already there. So thank you so much for bringing all this stuff up, because it's very rare to run into a product that can hit all those talking points, and I'm like, wait, we're still talking about the product. That's crazy. We're on a different topic. That wasn't intentional at all, but thank you for that. Because that it goes to show, because you guys are focusing on what we're talking about right now, and your product just so happens to be in that category, because high THC. And to be honest, we're going to have to kind of get away from high THC, because local and state governments are kind of cracking down on it, or thinking about cracking down on it. I think Colorado is trying to crack down on it, and I think they're wanting to change it to where you had to be 25 to get a certain level of THC, anything over 10 milligrams or something like that. So they're kind of going in these weird routes. But if we do it ourselves and we pull back already, and we're starting to say, hey, hold on, maybe they're onto something, but we need to do this the right way, and figure out maybe we're just kind of focusing on something else that we shouldn't be. THC is great, don't get me wrong, and some people do need just straight THC, pain, cancer patients, et cetera, et cetera. But for the most part, majority of us don't. And majority of us can be fine with a 10 milligram, 5 milligram, if it's a great product, especially like yours. You get the other effects in it, the other herbal stuff. And even when it comes to smoking, flower, regular cannabis, if you have a product that's 17%, but it's 3% terpenes, you might have a better experience than with something that was like 38% or 100% or whatever percentage people are claiming that's out there these days. You might have a better experience because it tastes better, it smokes better, just an all around, better feel for your whole body. And you might get that old school feeling that the older people were talking about, that, most of us unfortunately didn't get to experience back in the day, be it good or not. So thank you so much for this conversation and everything. This high THC, low THC thing is going to be a battle that we're going to be fighting for a long time. But I'm glad that people like, yourselves are, on our side trying to fight that battle too. It's like, look, it's not all about the THC. There's so much more that we can do with this plant than just, try to get high with it. That's just one of the side effects of using it. But that's not the only thing that it can do. So thank you so much for this conversation. If you guys don't have anything else, let's move on to the very last topic, and we'll get you guys going, because I know you're very busy people.
Sure. And thank
Cool.
you, Chad. Thank you for the opportunity once again. It's been great.
Cool, awesome. I mean, thank you both. It's been a great conversation. So without further ado, let's go down to the very last topic, and this is actually just the changing tides in New Mexico. And this is also another topic that I asked my bud tender friend. I said, well, what are some other things that you're seeing? And a couple of them actually gave me some things, and that kind of like added up to the New Mexico market, and the industry is changing. And one of the things that has changed is prices are really low right now. Of course, when any state goes legal, prices are pretty high. They didn't stay like that for very long here in New Mexico, but it did take us a couple years to get where we are now. You can find ounces for 30, 40 bucks. Granted, it's probably not going to be the best quality ounce, but you could definitely find ounces at a very, very low price. One downside to that is once you start getting to those lower prices, it becomes like this race to the bottom. And a lot of people start to try to compete. Well, I have the cheaper ounce. Come see me. And that goes back to the quality thing. Like, it's not all about the price point. You want a good product out there too, and that makes it harder for the people that are putting out really great products with quality to sell it, because then these people are expecting that $30 ounce price for everything, and that's just not the way it works. Like, there's layers to this. There's tiers. You have a top very high grade product, you have a very mid grade, and you have the lower tier, which I consider a $30 ounce to be very low tier. I'm not sure about yourselves personally, but I've seen some of those $30 ounces, and they're very low tier. And then the price point, talks for it. So that's one of the first things, is just the fact that, the price is dropped a lot. And I'm sure y'all have noticed it too, being in the edible space, how has the price on your guys' side, kind of fluctuated too?
Yeah.
Either or. Yeah. Whoever.
We'll go ladies first.
Okay. I was going to speak to the supply. I'll speak to the supply chain side, and then you can speak to the sales side. She'll share it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
We believe that we have really incredible partners with high quality product that need to be paid a fair price.
Mm-hmm.
And when we were one of the very first rosin gummies in New Mexico, and what we paid for a product at that time is very different than what we paid today, because we were essentially asking our suppliers to take a finished good off their shelf and sell it wholesale when they weren't set up for that. So we really leaned into wanting to be good partners and pay a price that was reciprocal, because if we are forcing our supply chain partners to always give us the lowest price, that is not going to be sustainable for them. We want them to have longevity. We want them to continue to bring forth high quality products so that we can bring forth high quality products. And that's not just on the cannabis side. I'm really proud of the pectin that we bring forth. Our flavors are very unique and high quality and different. And we believe that there is a price that should be awarded to this quality raw ingredient that we're bringing in. So we really try to link arms with our supply chain and work towards the best price that we can bring to our consumers, but recognizing that it's not like the $30 ounces that you're talking about. There has to be a sweet spot so that they can continue to survive in this business.
Yeah, because we all gotta make money to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I try to tell people, it's like, yeah, you may be getting $15, grams of rosin, but is it quality? Is it good rosin? And if you're paying more for, the other rosin, is it good quality too? Don't be getting ripped off. But if it's that quality and it's that good, you should be paying that price. You shouldn't just be, well, we're paying this and this and this. Well, that's because it's a low tier, product. Like, it shouldn't be compared to that if it's a higher grade product. And not every product is made the same. Especially when it comes to products like rosin.
Exactly. And there is an illicit market in every state. And we want to make sure that we are giving our money and our resources to those suppliers that are compliant and doing the right thing. We want to continue to infuse the cannabis community in that way and partner with those kind of people. So that's our supply chain side, and Will can speak to what we do on our SRPs.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Chad, and it's a topic that's just ongoing, of course, as we watch the market evolve. And kind of what I like to do is take a step back and take the bird's eye view in the rec space, and then kind of tie back into medical. I think the education cycle is something that's key in this conversation, this question, because consumers have had now 2+ years to shop around, to try lots of different things, to essentially figure out what does work, doesn't work, what maybe they like and don't. And I think they're getting ready to, and have been setting in on something that's more long-term for them. They're finding their formulas, they're finding the things that really do work for them, and not necessarily interested in trying the new thing as much anymore. So we aim with our products to be an add to your lifestyle. It's going to enhance your lifestyle and allow you to dial in to your sweet spot with one of our 4 formulas or multiple formulas. And I think if we're looking at that education cycle, we also want to talk about what does a race to the bottom mean? For consumers, I think they're the ones who really have the most to lose there. The manufacturers, producers, people who are competing in those numbers with the race to bottom, they're going to squeeze the margins, and it's really going to be, the outcome is going to be typically a poor product, or a product that just doesn't have the intention or the time put in to hold the quality standard where it could be. And also, on the side of the manufacturers, all the way down through, producers, all the way down through bud tenders in the front line, what does that mean for them? It means more production. It means more sales. It means increasing the work for the same profit margins, right? For the same levels of revenue. And I think that's unsustainable. So if you take a step back and you look at those two pieces, it's definitely something that we as an industry should want to change, in my opinion. So we have always kind of stood our ground with our price points based in what our ingredient profile looks like, and that we do all the amazing due diligence to source and gather all of these incredible ingredients together. And it's been, honestly, it's been a challenging conversation. And is when I get that question of, the price point and the why, why is that? There's lots of things to bring up and discuss, but a lot of times it's hard for some of the retailers to opt in and to really understand that what happens is, with consumer trust and loyalty, when our product is educated on and handed over and the consumer experience is good and is positive, that's going to be, a customer who's converted to not shopping around, to staying with that retail location, to staying even with that bud tender. These relationships develop. I've seen it so many times. And if you're looking at retaining revenue, it's really that shopping around aspect at the inline for the consumers. That's the most important thing for the brands, for the retailers. So what I like to do is go right to that subject and say, we've seen really consistent, steady brand loyalty with our consumers over time, and we have a nice data set now from 2 years plus. And that, I think, is an add value for most retailers. They see, okay, this is something that my people who I already have will stick with us for and have an enjoyable experience with. So to the price point answer, the short answer is we've had to stick our ground. We've had to really hold true with what we know the quality of the product is, and be that choice for consumers that maybe isn't everybody, but is for those who have shopped around or looking for something that is truly healthy and wellness oriented. So for us, it's been a bit of a battle, but we're very confident, and we remain humble that over time what we've seen is our consumers enjoy their experiences with our product.
We also this year have launched some promotions with our retailers that we haven't been able to do early on as a small brand. So customers should definitely go into their dispensaries that are carrying First Crop and ask about First Crop Fridays. You should be asking about First Crop Wellness Weeks. So those will kind of pop up periodically on monthly calendars. And it's just a really great way to make sure that you are putting your money and your resources in a local brand and in a high quality product, because it's all getting infused back in to New Mexico.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a good point, because we do have a lot of MSOs in the state, and some people don't even know some places are an MSO. It's like, oh, I had
Mhm.
no clue they weren't from New Mexico. So it's great that you guys point that out. Yeah, try to support local as much as possible. And like, I get it. Some people just like their product coming from cookies, whatever.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of great local products out there. And that's another thing that is changing too is the products. We're seeing more locals kind of come online. We're seeing more of the micros kind of getting out there. And, I go to Rio Doso and I run into micros I've never heard of before, but
Yeah.
they're just putting out fire, just straight
Mhm.
fire. And I'm like, what? Who is this guy? And so, I'm like, who is this? This is crazy. And so I'm loving seeing that. And that's another change that, that we're seeing in the state too, is the fact that, we're getting better products. However, the reason why we're seeing prices so low right now is because we have an overabundance of cannabis products, and the
Mhm.
reason why is because we have these big grows, 10,000, 20,000 plants, whatever it may be, and at that level it's really hard to keep quality up. And so that's why we're seeing a lot of these lower end products being flooded on the market at a very cheap price. And then so people think, well, the higher end products should be the same thing. And that's where our disconnect is. And to be honest, we have a fix for that in the law. It's written into the law. It's just the state isn't enforcing it. They're supposed to adjust the plant counts every year, essentially. Look at it. How's the industry? Do we need to lower the plant counts? Well, we probably should have lowered the plant counts a year and a half ago, if not, sooner. And we're still at the 20,000 plant limit, which was an emergency rule. And the state is just afraid of getting sued by the producers. But I'm a little confused because this is not like something they're making up. It's literally in the law.
Mhm.
And they knew beforehand coming into this industry that their plant counts will change. They didn't sign anything that says my plant count will not change. The only people who get that are the micros and people who grow at home. Those are the only two that have a plant count written in law. The rest of it is just an at rule. So I will say that the reason why one reason why prices are so low is because of that. And if we fix that issue, we would probably have more quality on the market, even more than we have now. And so these micros will probably have even more of a chance to
Mhm.
really get their numbers up, because maybe they do want to go from 200 to 400 plants. Maybe that's their goal, or maybe they want to stay at 200, but they still
Mhm.
get a better chance, and it's not getting muted by all of these $30 $40 ounces. And to be honest, if the customer wants it, cool, we'll give it to them. But at the end of the day, it goes back to the educational thing. We can also educate them on a better product,
Yep.
and it's as simple as posting a poster up. Maybe the 10th time they walk in, they get curious about that poster and you get to blow their mind, but it takes time.
Mhm.
So and that's one thing that we're seeing right now too. And hopefully we'll see the prices kind of, fix and adjust and everything. And this race to the bottom thing kind of fixes itself. Kind of like, with the amount of retails that we have. And that's the next thing that's changed in New Mexico's industry is there's significantly less retails, especially here in Las Cruces. We used to be able to go down one of the streets called Solano, and it was just flooded with dispensaries. Now, you drive down there and it's moderate. There's significantly less. And that's another thing that's changing in the industry here in New Mexico is we're starting to see, people get out of the industry, and it's good. Don't get me wrong. It's sad that people, are losing and getting out, but at the same time, we knew this was going to be the case.
Mhm.
That was the point of this industry. So like, how have y'all seen this as well? I mean, I'm sure it's affected some sales. I'm sure, certain areas of places shutting down, but I'm sure
Mhm.
you've seen it too. How many places have you seen really shut down, especially like in Santa Fe? Well,
Yeah, it's definitely been a turnover, since I've been really watching it at a granular level statewide for the last 2 years. It's been quite interesting.
hmm
We do really deep due diligence on the accounts that we approach, and we make sure that in the long term that it's going to be beneficial for both. So through that process, I have been able to track quite a few opens and closes, and it's to your point, like you said. In the case of somebody who may have been less educated on what it takes to run a cannabis business, to be a licensed operator, and maybe didn't have as many sources available to them on the education side of things for that, it's really a sad case, and
Mhm.
yeah,
I feel deeply for those who have jumped in and maybe they weren't previous business owners, maybe they were but didn't have cannabis experience. It is, as we said before, a tough industry, and I think it's very important to have your helmet strapped on, and to know as many things as you can about what it's like.
yeah,
So I have a lot of conversations like that with some of the newer retailers that we do approach, and we're always checking in and seeing, how they're doing and seeing if we can, help in any way, support them. And I think, to your point, it will, both of those things, the number of licenses on the retail side and the price points in the market will correct themselves. It's a natural ebb and flow, and that's kind of how human nature works. There's this change to it and this cycle, and I think we're in that period of where we're turning over on both of those license numbers at retail and also the price points in the market. I believe, to the previous question, that quality will play out.
Yeah. I think quality wins in the end, just like they say love wins in the end. I think quality wins in the end in the cannabis industry. Of course, love goes into growing and making that product, but and in the end product, that quality, I think, is going to trump all in the end. And we're going through growing pains right now. We have 2 years to look. Like I said, we're considered a mature market, and the consumer's figuring it out, the industry's figuring it out, our legislature's figuring it out, hopefully. And it's going to be this whole learning process, and this is a part of it. And like you said, Will, yes, this is part of the natural process, and I'm glad that we've allowed the natural process to continue. Because if we start intervening, making the licenses, $30,000-$40,000, whatever, and trying to mimic what these other states have done, we're going to start going backwards. We're going to start seeing more issues. I mean, if you look at Minnesota and like their, lottery system, it's been a mess. There's lawsuits after lawsuits after lawsuits, and then it's just going to get worse. And so if we did something like that, what do you think is going to happen here? Lawsuits after lawsuits and people getting out. So I'm glad that we stayed on the same track. We've allowed it to naturally kind of evolve and kind of fix itself. And the price point hopefully will correct itself. And with the help of us too, as well, educating people and, and people like yourselves, just going out there and hammering it out and really preaching to the people, of, what a good product is. That's real advocacy right there. I get it, it's a part of your business, but that's real advocacy. That's how it works. And so I'm proud that there's people like yourselves that are in this space as well. And we're both out there, on boots on the ground, just really getting it and making sure that, people are getting the best product and they're getting educated at the same time. Educating people ain't easy. And one thing I wanted to mention too, before, we move on to the very, last part of this is, HB 10 is going to go into effect in July too. And that's actually going to add to more places closing down and more places getting cracked down, because now we're going to have a law enforcement factor to the industry now too. And so it was essentially there the whole time, but there's, bickering between CCD and law enforcement of who has authority. Now there's no question. And so, these illegal Chinese grows, the illegal product coming in from other states, the illegal dispensaries or whatever, I don't think there's that many anymore. There used to be. That's all going to get cracked down on more. But I just hope it's the right people and it's not a low-hanging fruit situation like we've seen with the inspections and stuff like that. I really hope that this HB 10 thing and this, cannabis enforcement that's coming down, I really do hope it helps the industry positively. And I hope the players that aren't doing the correct thing do get out and, they're not just, you have something misspelled, you're getting shut down kind of situation. I say it almost as a joke, but at the same time, it's a real situation for certain people. And I have seen people, get inspected 10 times in a year when, nothing's ever found. And, the guy down the street hasn't been seen once.
Yep.
So, I just really hope it doesn't go to that. But, moving on to the very last, point, and if you guys have anything on the HB 10 thing, please, interject and intervene and, say something. But, Texas banning hemp, that actually has, huge effects here in New Mexico, whether it goes in or not. We're still going to be probably getting Texas patients. But if, Governor Abbott signs the bill that's on his desk right now, we're probably going to see an influx of, people from Texas coming here, to get cannabis, because there's not going to be anywhere they can get those products other than online and risking that. So what's y'all's thought about, this whole Texas thing going on with the hemp?
I just think cannabis is such a wild ride, and we try really hard as a small team not to take the detour off to the left and really wait to see what's going to happen with the execution, because it's so easy to kind of spiral around potential legislation, and really we just need to see what's going to happen and support our border dispensaries the best that we can. But I try not to spend too much of my time until something has been executed. So I think it would be a really shame if that happened for everyone in Texas. There's a lot of people that feel really comfortable with hemp-derived products. That's sometimes the stepping stone to trying maybe a cannabis product, but that's where I am. I'm just trying to see where it lands. There's so much happening in New Mexico right now where that's where my concerns are and my time is, but we'll just have to see.
Yeah, Will?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. What comes to mind really is that focus that we spoke on earlier. There's, like Erica said, cannabis is a wild ride. And when you look at differences in states and, with this latest from Texas, I have to say, honestly, I expected that it would make it and that it would be passed. It's not surprising from a Texas standpoint. I do really feel, especially for those who are of whether diagnosed or not in medical need of this plant, and just to be subjugated and put back into that place, speaking from my own personal experience, and not allowed to have a connection with a plant that comes from nature, which we all come from, it's hard for me to believe. And I feel so deeply for people who now have been stripped of their right to it, So just take a moment to, send the prayers to them. I hope that we as New Mexicans continue to educate, continue to lead with quality and intention, and are in any way we can be a safe space of even just, education and support with what's going on over there. It's unfortunate. And it's going to be a long conversation, over there. But I think ultimately, I feel like this will be an inflection point for the public to dig in, to dig their heels in and to double down on the work that needs to be done to change that availability and that, the need for those people.
Yeah, 100%, and the advocates in Texas have been giving it hell. They've been fighting nonstop. Shout outs to y'all. Y'all have just been wonderful. So just keep fighting. Don't give up. Even if it does get signed or whatever. And to be honest, I hope he doesn't sign it for the simple fact that I live 30 minutes from El Paso. And so I have to go to Texas a lot. I have to go to the VA in El Paso. Most of the people in Sunland Park that work at those dispensaries are from Texas, live in El Paso actively. So if that does get signed, we may see, an influx already more than it is of Texas, law enforcement, really cracking down on people coming in from dispensaries that are near the Texas, New Mexico border. And that's my concern, as someone, a resident in the area, I don't want to be targeted when I'm just going to go to the damn VA for my leg or for whatever issue I have or my shoulder or whatever. I'm not going there for cannabis. If I just get pulled over something stupid and they start assuming things, I get harassed. And to be honest, like right now, you kind of have a scapegoat with this hemp derived stuff. They're not really messing with you as much. But if that's gone, there's no scapegoat whatsoever for anyone. And, us being from out of state and being so close to there, and to be honest, where we're at in the area, I call it the paper rip of New Mexico, because that's kind of what it looks like, between us and like the El Paso area. So sometimes your neighbor, like your backyard neighbor, is in Texas and you're in New Mexico. And sometimes part of your house is in Texas and New Mexico. So we have this weird jurisdiction thing going on in the first place in this area. So my concern would be law enforcement cracking down in the area of El Paso, especially in Sunland Park. I know there was a concern of, one of the dispensaries being too close to the Texas border. Well, all of them are too close to the Texas border already as is. So that would be my main concern. So I hope he doesn't sign it. But if he does, New Mexico will make more money, but it will come at a cost of more risk. More risk for everybody involved. So I'm probably going to be taking that New Mexico route down to Sunland Park exclusively and not even mess with going through Texas. Luckily, we have that option. It takes longer, but to be honest, it's more worth it. So that way I don't have to worry about dealing with Texas law enforcement in the first place. Even if I don't have anything on me, I just don't want to deal with it. Like people are like, oh, you shouldn't worry if you're not doing anything wrong. Well, I just don't want to deal with it in the first place. Like I don't want to. I just want to go about my day. So how do you guys feel about when I bring that up? That's like a total different thing, because we have to think about, the places that are bordering Texas too. And there's quite a few in the state.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I feel like close with some of the bud tenders working in Sunland Park that have been, supporting us, and the council has been supporting us for so long now, and new ones that we're really, tying hands with. I really feel for them and their daily back and forth, their commutes. I think, ultimately it really comes down to clear and legal framework. It has to, for me, with the experiences I've been through, in life in general, I am, always on my P's and Q's with clear and legal framework. I've experienced the other side of that, and, was definitely not worth it for me. So, I recommend everybody take a moment to breathe on it and to think about their choices and how those may affect themselves and their loved ones, and make the best choice that they possibly can. Again, I don't agree with it, but I think that, the legal framework is what it is, and that we have to work inside of it to the utmost best of our capabilities in order to change the system. I think that's really where change ultimately comes from. And it's a battle, but I think those choices, even the daily ones, will have to be, examined. And I think, I think it'll get to a point where there are stories about people being limited on their choices in life, and that may come down to employment. It may come down to cannabis use, and I hope those things are highlighted, and I hope those are spotlighted, and it shows more of the imbalance in this bill and what it's going to do to Texas residents.
Yeah, I feel for any time patients lose access of any sort, in any state, anywhere, even when we were medical cannabis here in New Mexico, and we had the dirty 30, and we had that's what we called them, and we didn't have the best selection. If a dispensary shut down that I just didn't like because of their quality, whatever, I felt for the patient, because that patient just lost access. And that's what's happening in Texas with the hemp stuff. Tons of patients, especially veterans, are losing access. And, they're one of the ones that are fighting back on it. Hopefully, the governor doesn't sign it, because, New Mexico will still make money, everyone. We just have less of a harassment, coming from us from other parts of the state. So that's really all I have for the changes in New Mexico. There's a lot, and I could go on forever, but we'd be here for hours. But these are just some of the main ones that I'm seeing through the grapevine. And shout out to my friend who gave me some of these topics, because they're really good topics and talking points. Even though some of them I'm kicking till the horse is powder, but there's other components of it, like the high THC thing. We're finding out that the younger crowd is getting it, but the older crowd isn't. How do we go about this? So thank you for the tips that y'all gave everyone on that too, because a lot of people could probably take that like, okay, maybe we need to work with the medical professionals more. So thank you both again so much for joining me today. That's all I have for this week's episode of Ask Chad Grassy Logic. But before we go, is there anything you guys would like to say?
Just thank you. Really appreciate how you hold space for conversations like this.
Thank you.
It's been really wonderful, and I can tell how deeply you care, not only about the industry, but those that really use it as a health tool. And so we're just grateful to be part of these kind of conversations. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure talking to both of you. And actually, it's great meeting you for the first time, Erica. Will, I see you all the time, and hopefully I see you soon, buddy. But yeah, is there anything you'd like to say before we head out?
I would second that, Chad. Like I said at the beginning, it's been really nice to watch your impact over the past couple of years, and just the first few town halls that I sat in on and see what you and the team are doing. It takes a community, and in this sense, New Mexico is one community. So I commend you for being a spear tip in that. And, we're here as First Crop doing the things we know how to do really well as best possible. And hopefully between everyone's efforts who's intentionally aligned with what this plant is capable of in healing and quality of life for people, we can all really take it to the next levels. And I think New Mexico is working really hard, and it's great to be in interviews like this and have conversations like this to continue to push that energy,
100%. And thank you so much for that. And thank you for joining me. And I look forward to seeing your product flourish, grow, and, this industry expand in New Mexico. And the nation's watching us. They're watching how we're regulating this. Like I've said before many times, no one's done this correctly, but I think we're on the right path. So that's all I have for this week. Thank you both again for joining me. First Crop, thank you for joining. I'll be back next week with another episode of Ask Chad Grassy Logic. Make sure you like, subscribe, follow, whatever you got to do to stay in the know. I'll see y'all next week. All right.
See everybody.